Some moments change everything. For Margaret Hayes, that moment came on a cool autumn evening in 2023, when her daughter Rachel invited her to dinner at the home Rachel shared with her husband, Derek. Margaret was 72 then, a woman who had raised Rachel alone after her husband passed when Rachel was just 8. She'd worked 2 jobs: mornings at the hospital cafeteria, evenings cleaning offices so Rachel could have piano lessons, summer camps, and eventually college. Margaret never remarried. She poured everything into her daughter. Rachel had done well. She'd become a marketing executive, married Derek Chen, a successful architect, and they lived in a beautiful colonial home with a wraparound porch. Margaret was proud, though she sometimes felt small in their grand house, with its marble countertops and original artwork. That particular evening, Rachel had insisted Margaret come for Sunday dinner. "It's been too long, Mom," she'd said on the phone. "Derek's mother will be there too. It'll be nice." Margaret arrived early, as she always did, wearing her best dress, a simple navy number she'd owned for years but kept pristine. She brought homemade apple pie, Rachel's favorite since childhood. Derek's mother, Patricia Chen, was already there, seated in the living room like a queen holding court. Patricia was a retired judge, elegant and intimidating, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that seemed to assess and dismiss you in one glance. "Margaret," Patricia said with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How quaint." Homemade pie. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Rachel had made pot roast, and the table was set beautifully. But as they ate, Margaret noticed something troubling. Derek barely spoke to Rachel. When he did, his tone carried an edge that made Margaret's chest tighten. Then came the moment that would change everything. They were discussing dessert when Derek stood abruptly. "Rachel, your mother should eat in the kitchen," he said, his voice casual, as if he were commenting on the weather. "She's more comfortable there, aren't you, Margaret? You're used to simpler settings." The room went silent. Margaret felt her face grow hot. Rachel looked stricken but said nothing. She glanced at her mother, then at Derek, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Patricia actually smirked, a small, satisfied curve of her lips. Derek continued, emboldened by the silence. "I mean, let's be honest. She practically is a maid. Always has been. Let her eat in the kitchen with Max." Max was their golden retriever. Margaret felt something crack inside her chest, not her heart exactly, but her patience, her willingness to stay small and quiet in her daughter's life. She stood slowly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. She reached for Rachel's hand. "Come on, sweetheart," Margaret said softly. Rachel looked up at her mother, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, Margaret thought Rachel might refuse, might choose this man and this life over her own mother, but Rachel stood. She let her mother take her hand. Together, they walked toward Derek. Margaret's voice, when she spoke, was quiet but steady. "My daughter deserves better than a man who treats anyone, let alone her mother, with such cruelty. And she certainly deserves better than a family that would smile at such behavior." She looked at Patricia, whose smirk had vanished. "Rachel, get your coat," Margaret said. Mother and daughter walked out together, leaving Derek and Patricia in stunned silence. They went to Margaret's small apartment across town, the one Rachel had grown up in. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Rachel had done her homework, where Margaret had taught her to bake, where they'd shared countless meals. Rachel sobbed for hours. Margaret just held her, stroking her hair like she'd done when Rachel was small. "I was so afraid," Rachel finally whispered. "Afraid that if I stood up to him, I'd lose everything, the house, the life, the image of success. I didn't realize I was losing myself." "You were never lost, sweetheart," Margaret said. "You just forgot who you were for a while." The next morning, Rachel filed for divorce. Derek tried to fight it, but Rachel had found something she'd misplaced years ago: her spine, her voice, her sense of self-worth. The divorce took 8 months. Derek was furious, especially when Rachel refused to be bought off or intimidated. She moved back in with Margaret, sleeping in her childhood bedroom, Rebuilding herself piece by piece, Rachel discovered, through the divorce proceedings, that Derek had been unfaithful, multiple affairs over the years with colleagues and clients. Patricia had known and covered for him, believing that boys will be boys and that a wife's job was to look the other way and maintain appearances. The revelation hurt, but it also freed Rachel from any remaining doubt. A year later, Rachel had rebuilt her life. She'd gotten a promotion at work, moved into her own apartment smaller than the Colonial, but hers, and had started dating again. Cautiously, Margaret watched her daughter bloom again, becoming the strong, confident woman she'd raised as. For Derek, the humiliation of the divorce and the exposure of his affairs damaged his reputation. Several clients left his firm. Patricia, for her part, never apologized, but she also never spoke to Margaret or Rachel again, which suited them both just fine. One Sunday evening, 2 years after that fateful dinner, Rachel and Margaret sat at that same small kitchen table, eating homemade apple pie. "Mom," Rachel said quietly, "thank you for reminding me who I was." Margaret smiled, taking her daughter's hand. "You always knew, sweetheart. You just needed permission to remember." Outside, the autumn leaves were falling again, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. Life continued, as it always does, but for Margaret and Rachel Hayes, it continued with dignity, with love, and with the unshakable knowledge that family means protecting each other always. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away, and sometimes the greatest gift a mother can give is showing her daughter that she deserves to be treated with respect no matter what.